In the mid-2010s and beyond, K-pop companies had achieved the unthinkable, the global success of an industry that they always dreamed would one day take the world by storm. And with this newfound success, companies are preparing for a new era of K-pop, the era of localization. If you don't know what localization means in the scope of K-pop, it basically is the act of creating targeted music and content for local markets across the world, while maintaining a stylized image that was popularized in the Korean market. The localization process can be seen when you see a non-Korean group that is very obviously using the K-pop aesthetic and method to target a local or global demographic. These groups sometimes have Korean teams behind them, or they have taken notes from the K-pop market and are implementing that into the group's look or strategy. Recently, we've seen pretty much the biggest companies in K-pop announce that they are in fact ready to embrace the localization process, as many are being hired and training for these localized groups at this time right now. We've already seen bits and pieces of what the process can achieve across various Asian countries. But right now, there is a newer form of localization on the horizon, the American localization of K-pop. This might seem as an issue for the distant future, rather than something that's important right now, as none of these American localized groups have debuted yet. But the reason I'm talking about this right now is because if this localization process does go through, it will change the K-pop industry forever. It will change how they operate, how they make their money, and if these big four companies succeed, they will shift from K-pop manufacturing companies to pop idol manufacturing companies. Another big repercussion of this upcoming venture is that whether the American localization is successful or not will really make or break whether K-pop stays a relevant niche or whether it dies out in popularity within Western countries. The reason K-pop rose to popularity during the 2010s in the West was due to a massive gap in the market for pop idol music. Once Fifth Harmony and One Direction were done, the public at large were done with manufactured pop groups, and this led their respective fan bases alongside those who were witnessing this pop idol drought in Western pop music and still wanted more to K-pop. But if K-pop companies start going to Western countries to start filling up this gap in the market, then who's to say whether people will still want to go directly to the source for K-pop, when they could just become a fan of its localized editions? All these companies are planning an American girl group, which seems accurate as America is lacking an American girl group at the top of their industry right now, and American boy groups seem like a harder sell at this point. The most interesting thing about all of this though has to be the fact that the Western music industry has no care for the whole company label ecosystem that K-pop has. So these big companies might have the money to fund these projects, but their company name won't guarantee these girl groups big success in America like their Korean counterparts. In this video, I'm going to be discussing the information we know so far on these expansions and my opinions on which companies have the most potential in the American market. I'm also curious to know which companies you think have the most potential, so if you want to share your opinions, you can leave them down below in the comments. But first, before we do that, let's start with the group that are giving us a rough idea about this localization process and how it will work at this point in time. You might have heard of them already over the past year. Under a subsidiary of Avex, XG debuted in 2022 with their first single, Tippy Toes. And it's said that Hikaru from Kepler is eventually going to join XG, but we don't know whether that's still happening. Now XG aren't a traditionally localized group, because if they were, they'd be targeted to Japan rather than globally. But XG are an attempt at using non-Korean members and a South Korean team to emulate what is a very K-pop leaning group to an audience of global consumers. I think this approach would also reflect in the upcoming localization in America, as Western artists usually end up being marketed globally too. However, I can't say I'm at all that sold on XG's current approach, or that it is at all that well thought out, or even that it makes much sense. And this has nothing to do with the output of the group, more to do with the stationing of the group. The group is intended to be a global girl group, and their music is sung in English and not Japanese. And yet so far the company has been dead set on promoting the group in South Korea, even though the demand is pretty much non-existent for a Japanese girl group that uses an aesthetic that could be found in their own Korean girl groups. But we can learn why XG is marketed this way through this statement given by the founder of Avex Group. Just because we are working with Korean producers doesn't mean the group is working with a Korean label. Everyone is Japanese. It isn't like K-pop, it's more American. I am emphatically saying everyone is Japanese. We worked with Korean producers, but we just used Korean producers. All rights belong to Avex. Why do we have to lose to Koreans? The Japanese can do it also. Even Koreans sent a singer like Boa to Japan to mimic us. Since we were on the losing side, we asked to work with Korean producers. Now this really shows that the purpose of XG doesn't seem to be to form a global girl group. It comes across as more of a revenge plan by Avex to get back at South Korea for taking their idol music and making it big across the world. It seems that the J-pop industry is finally realizing that they fucked up by geo-blocking everything and banning international fans from having access to their artists throughout the 2010s. And now they are trying to make it K-pop's problem. My question for Avex is, are you interested in pushing a global girl group, or are you interested in pushing a Japanese K-pop girl group in South Korea? Like, if the company really wanted to make XG global, why are they at Music Bank and not performing at some 88 Rising festival or something? I think XG right now, their current success and difficulty living up to the name of being a global girl group will also carry on to other companies that wish to do the same. If companies opt for an Asian American girl group, they might see the same success as XG right now, which isn't as sales driven but more social media driven. But on the other hand, we don't know how a non-Asian girl group made by a Korean team would be received. Overall, it seems like XG's team have a lot of improvements to make. And if they truly want the group to actually become a global group, then they need to branch out from Korean promotion. The only problem is that with an Asian girl group, sadly, promotions across the world can be severely limited. This is partially one of the reasons K-pop companies might be persuaded to form a Western non-Asian girl group, because it could be easier to gain access to global markets like what Fifth Harmony or Little Mix did. In 2022, JYP revealed to the world his plans for the A2K project, short for America to Korea. It is a collaboration between JYP and Republic Records, who set out to form a global girl group that will have underwent intensive training from Korean choreographers, executives, and producers. It will be very interesting to see how Korean entertainment companies handle localizing the K-pop trainee system, because in most Western countries, their intensified training system is viewed by those who know about it as somewhat unethical, due to the weight management involved that can lead to eating disorders and long hours where trainees practice throughout the night. Already the project had caused controversy in the West due to JYP's requirements that the trainees for this girl group could only be between the ages of 18 to 13 years old. In addition to these concerns, the group is supposedly going to be formed through a survival competition show, which, if you've witnessed the televised psychological abuse and sometimes physical injuries that some of these very young Korean contestants endure during these programs, it is very concerning that all the contestants will be 18 or under. When it comes to JYP's ability to create a successful American girl group, I don't think their chances at success are very high. While TWICE has shown great promise in the Western market as of late, it's mostly due to TWICE being in a very stable position, being named the nation's girl group earlier on in their career, almost a decade ago, which kind of made them impossible to ignore as a person from the West getting into K-pop. Their success in the Western market has nothing to do with JYP's excellent marketing in America for the group or anything, but it's more due to TWICE already being well known to all K-pop stans previously before they attempted to switch their marketing to America. But for the A2K girl group, who will be starting from scratch in the beginnings of the 5th gen probably, I think it's more accurate to look at the 4th gen who have come before them, than to look back to JYP's 3rd or 2nd generation groups who don't represent the company's current trajectory. Looking at the current state of ITZY and NMIXX, who are the newer generation groups JYP has put out as of late, we can see a more accurate representation on whether A2K will be successful. I believe JYP has a problem with sustaining longevity and an inability to understand American tastes, and these two things are key for an American girl group's success. One thing you'll notice is that America prefers their girl groups to be adults and to explore more mature themes in their music. Global girl groups that originate from Western countries do this as a way to appeal to all demographics. Teenagers and children like older role models to look up to in pop music, and they also like listening to music that makes them feel more mature than they actually are. All the while, these groups can appeal just as well to adults because their music isn't too child-friendly that it would alienate them. This becomes a problem for JYP, as not only are A2K contestants required to be teenagers who can't participate in selling these mature themes, but it's also because JYP's style already tends to be sometimes a bit bratty and kinda kids pop adjacent. ITZY in particular was supposed to be marketed to America a lot more in the beginning, but this arrangement didn't work out and they ended up focusing more on Japan in the end because it's hard to push a girl group to Americans who would see their style as a bit too childish for their tastes. And their English lyrics and styling just isn't appealing to them as a result of this. Now you might be saying there is nothing wrong with K-pop groups having a more tween targeted sound, because K-pop's demographic does skew to younger teenagers. But in the business of creating a global American girl group, I have doubts that JYP will be able to access the general public like American girl groups usually do. And I believe they'll remain a niche girl group for K-pop stans who are in the know, as opposed to filling the shoes of the last big global American girl group, Fifth Harmony. In theory, considering how hybe were the ones who managed to break BTS into the West, you'd think that they'd have the most experience as they seem to know what American consumers of K-pop like, which might make it easier when it comes to making a girl group that the general public could like. Hybe bought Ithaca Holdings, which is run by Scooter Braun, which, knowing how Scooter Braun works, how he makes big stars, and the connections he has in the Western music industry, this is looking quite promising for Hybe's American localization process. Even though I have my doubts on whether Hybe will be able to have a top global girl group that reaches all demographics, remember that BTS were able to get to the top based on fandom alone, so we can't really use them as an indicator. However, Hybe has already tapped into something that is important in the majority of Western countries, and that's the illusion of authenticity. While JYP has tried their hand in it by always hiring personable idols, and SM has never really attempted to do it to their detriment in the American music market, while SM idols could be down to earth, their music, their styling is all very out of this world in that way, which means they are more in tune with American tastes than their competition. I kind of predict that since JYP has great understanding of what appeals to the Japanese market, I see JYP's furthered localization in Japan as a very successful venture for the company, while their American venture will be unsuccessful. On the other hand, I predict that Hybe will experience this the opposite way round. They'll have limited success in Japan, but they could have a good amount of success in America. Out of everyone on this list, I believe SM's shots at American localization won't actually come to fruition and might just be a bluff by Lee Soo-man himself. Because we've heard this story before. How many times has Lee Soo-man promised a localized NCT unit, and how many times has it actually been made? I have doubts that NCT Hollywood will even happen, and if it does, I just don't see it being the success SM wants it to be, because SM has this habit of cowering in fear when they upset the fans, and stans of NCT weren't happy with the prospect of NCT Hollywood. I think that if it's true that SM is going through a major overhaul of its board members and Lee Soo-man is on the brink of being pushed out in the next few years, then maybe they will finally go through with their localization. But under the circumstances the company is under right now, I think SM might be a bit too stubborn to fully attempt localization outside of NCT. Out of every company on this list, if SM were to try and make an American girl group, I think they'd have the least success. If I thought JYP struggled to understand American tastes, then SM is probably even more clueless and in the dark than they are. They've tried many times and it just hasn't worked out in their favour or given them the results they wanted. And now their latest obsession with things like Kwangya and their SMCU, that's just all too convoluted for Western consumers to understand or care about. It's not looking good. So that's all for now when it comes to the prospects of K-pop's American localization and the upcoming move into the globalization era of K-pop. I heard a while ago that even CJ is going to try and get the produced series up and running in Latin America, but I don't know whether that's still going to go ahead. With the recent lack of interest in survival shows these days in K-pop recently, I wonder if CJ and Mnet are still confident in localizing. We'll see the results of all these American ventures in the next upcoming years, and something's telling me the Big Four will be humbled by this experience and will realize that Western success isn't all that it's cracked up to be.